It was really good to see Duke basketball back in the win column over the weekend. The defense told the biggest story, but also it was an opportunity for some guys further on the bench to get some playing time. Is that going to matter at all as Duke gets into these bigger marquee matchups? Let's find out and discuss on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome on into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us on this Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on in the life of Duke athletics. We're talking a lot about Duke basketball today. Have a little Duke football talk at the very end of the program with our good buddy Josh Cox from Duke Football Talks Section 17 podcast. Our show is available for free wherever it is that you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review on the Apple Podcast platform. Subscribe to our podcast feed, and then you can also watch the show each and every day on YouTube. Like this video, share it with your friends, and we appreciate you hitting that subscribe button to our channel as well. Again, today's show, we're going to talk about this win over Wofford for Duke basketball. They pick up their third win of the season, bounce back after their loss to Kentucky, and now they get set for a really big test this upcoming weekend, taking on Arizona. A 51-point victory for the Blue Devils over Wofford. Saw many players get an opportunity to play in this basketball game. Sion James was back from injury for this Duke team when many people believed he might not be available at all. We saw the debut of Patrick Ngongba II for Duke basketball, and then most notably, really impressed with what we saw out of Isaiah Evans. And it begs the question, does their playing time as of late warrant the opportunity to extend the rotation in these bigger games? Early in the season, I'm one to believe that it does. I think the shooting ability that the likes of Evans and Harris bring give them an opportunity to compete for minutes out there on the floor. It's going to be a fun conversation about those things and much more in the world of Duke basketball as we welcome on in longtime friend of the program, Josh Cox, who's back with us here today. It was good to see Duke get back into the win column, man, and against a school like Wofford. We'll get to the defense here in a little bit because it really set the tone. Again, I really love that we were able to see so many players get out there and take the floor for Duke.
Yeah, it was an opportunity for Duke to let off a little bit of steam, coming off that Kentucky loss, number one, and then for Coach Scheyer to be able to really explore that bench a little bit more than he was able to, in Atlanta. So the previous game. And so, I mean, it was great. I was in the house for the game at Cameron. And I mean, a 51 point, or was it 51? Was 51. That what it ended up being? 51-point victory. Got to see a lot of guys. And, like I said, it was a great coming off of a loss. It was a great way to just kind of let out some frustration is the vibe I kind of got.
And then when we look back and we think about that loss to Kentucky, I think everyone will say the bigger thing that still jumps out about Duke's performance against the Wildcats was simply the shooting from the outside. 4 of 22 was Duke from three-point range. They respond. They go 16 of 38 against a school in Wofford. Another double-digit performance, knocking down three-point shots from the outside. And a quarter of them came from a player who didn't even see the floor against the Kentucky Wildcats in Isaiah Evans. I think that the more this team plays out throughout the course of the season, Josh, I'm not going to be surprised at all if that becomes the case where it truly is Duke's playing their best games when they're knocking down so many three-point shots from the outside. And so, it makes me go back to that Kentucky game in particular. And if some guys didn't have their shots fallen, maybe it is that chance to pull the plug and see, okay, does somebody off the bench have it tonight? Can they knock down three-point shots from the outside?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, once again, I know this is not a Kentucky recap, but if you do look back at that Kentucky game, and I think our friend Jordan Mann did a good job of highlighting a couple of these clips, it's not that Duke was getting bad shots. They just weren't hitting them. They weren't taking bad shots. I mean, Caleb Foster had wide open shots. In fact, he had 2 wide open threes in one possession that just didn't go down. I mean, Duke was coming off the screens, getting the open looks, and they weren't falling. And so there's a lot to talk about, with that. But But you're right. I mean, with the shooting ability of this team, when you have Khan, who is an elite shooter, and then you have Caleb Foster, who is, I think he's underrated as a shooter, and
Yep.
Tyrese is off to a great start. You have all those, and we can go down the list. I do believe that Duke will be at their best when they're hitting the three, and that does also beg the question: if Isaiah Evans specifically, if he can compete on the defensive side of the floor, I don't see any way he does not work his way into that rotation. And I'm not here to, downplay any of the other guys that are in the rotation currently, but I mean, not many people have the streak scoring ability that Isaiah Evans has, correct? So, like, if he can compete on the defensive end, he's going to have to take somebody's minutes. He's going to have to. I mean, he's too talented of an offensive player to not have him out there on the court, being able to, go on one of those heaters like he did, this past Saturday.
Yeah, looking at Duke in their wins so far this season, they've made 11 3-pointers, 16 and 17. In the one loss against Kentucky, the team just makes 4. So in wins, they're averaging like 14-something 3-pointers per game. Their one loss so far this year, it's just 4. It just feels like, hey, if we're not making shots from the outside, use all your resources if you can to make sure that you can get it. What's also been impressive with the Duke team, when they're also making shots on the interior, it's not like the points in the paint are falling off that drastically either. I think it's a smart kind of Duke team when playing at their best. Like, they're going to take open 3-point looks. And then what we're also seeing is clear, hard drives to the rim, lobs for dunks, layups, like high percentage shots factored into it as well.
Well, it's just like in any sport. You take football, your run sets up your pass, or your pass sets up your run, right, in football. Well, in basketball, it's like, okay, you're going to press up on us so that we can't hit the open shot. Okay, fine. We're gonna drive to the basket. Oh, you're going to sag off because you don't want us to drive to the basket. Now we have open looks, right? So, like, there's always give and take. And at the end of the day, I feel like the offense, really has the upper hand there for Duke in the fact that they can do both. You can have games where you get open looks, and you're right, they're going to knock down 15, 16, 17 3-pointers. And maybe there are other games where, they don't get those looks that they, are used to getting. And I think that you've already seen, obviously, Cooper is very good downhill heading to the basket, but you've also seen Khan. Khan is not just he's not just a standstill shooter. He can get to the rim. He's very crafty once he gets, in the lane. And then, I mean, you got your bigs, especially, come on, who just throw it somewhere up there near the rim, and he's going to go get it.
He's going to take care of it for sure. He's getting better game by game, which has been a big asset for the Duke team in particular. All right, let's talk about the defense, because it was just so unbelievable against Wofford, and we'll continue that conversation, what it means for the Duke team and more after we take our first break here on the program. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at Roy. Listen up, Duke fans. You need to download the Roy app. You've heard us talk about Roy this season and how they've invested in revolutionizing the NIL industry. It allows you, the fan, to have a say in who gets the NIL money. And here's what I love about Roy. You get your money back if that player transfers. Roy's helping us keep our team together, and it's actually good for the game long term. You could support any player that you would like by depositing a little appreciation onto that player's account. To go do this, download the Roy app. You can see what the logo looks like if you're watching with us on YouTube, or go to joinroy.com. This week, we're going to spotlight our Locked On Player of the Week, Tyrese Proctor, for his big-time basketball performance on the floor for this Duke team. We're going to throw some money into his account over on Roy. Every contribution counts, $10, $20. It all adds up the same, and it's going to help our favorite players stay put. Join me and show some love for Tyrese Proctor this week. Download the Roy app or go to joinroy.com. Use promo code LOCKEDON. Every athlete from every team is there. It's no purchase necessary, void or prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for full terms. Roy, support the players, change the game. One of our proud sponsors of Locked On Blue Devils. The show today is also brought to you by our friends over at Game Time, the absolute best place to find your last-minute tickets. Game Time's got a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. It's going to filter out the fluff, to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of different tickets. We toggle this feature up front with no surprise fees at checkout. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. That's one of my favorite features that the app has, so you know exactly the type of experience that you're walking into. Game Time is the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time, a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. So again, the defense that Duke basketball displayed over the weekend in their game against Wofford was second to none. I mean, just 35 points scored for the Terriers. It is a shot clock era record for the Blue Devils. The way they were shooting and just their effectiveness on the offensive end of the floor, I don't want to go as far to say, Josh, that if you and I were out there playing defense for Duke, it still would have been a similar result. But it was pretty close, man. It was pretty close.
Yeah, it was a historic performance, really by the defense. And I mean, holding them to 24, under 25% shooting, for the game. It's just, that's a wild number, man. Like, and it's not like Wofford, and I'm not saying Wofford's some sort of powerhouse, but I mean, Wofford's been competitive in
tournament team
games
several times.
Exactly.
The
They're a
years.
respectable program. I mean, this is an incredible defensive job. And I do think there are a couple of things. You have your team leader in Cooper Flagg, who is 110% committed to playing on the defensive end, right? His effort on the defensive end is there for sure. And then you've got, and I know he only played a handful of minutes just because of the way the game went, but you've got Kaman Malawach, he's a game changer, man. Even if he doesn't get, the steal or the block, the way he impacts that side of the court, you just can't overstate his value. And then you have Malik Brown, who, by the way, I actually thought struggled in this game, especially in the offensive end, his decision making. And there were a couple of times where Coach Scheyer had to pull him out of the game for some decisions he made on offense. But he is a defensive, just a savant on defense. His hands get in the passing lanes better than anybody on this team. And then I think finally what you're seeing, JJ, on the defensive side is I think you've got players. I mentioned Isaiah Evans already. If he wants to get in the rotation, he's got to compete on the defensive end. I think you're seeing players like Isaiah Evans, and then maybe on a greater scale, you got Con Knippel. Con knows that he's an offensively talented player, but he also knows that in order to maximize his effectiveness on this team, he's got to become a good defensive player. And so I think you're seeing these guys that are committing to the defensive side of the court, and we're seeing the fruit of it. And even in the Kentucky game, I actually thought Duke defended well, even in that loss. I mean,
Sure.
So I think Duke's off to a great start defensively. Hands are in the passing lanes, and it's all spearheaded, I feel like, by Cooper Flagg and Kaman Malawach.
Yeah, Wofford is 5 of 33 from three-point range. That is 15% shooting. And there is a case to be made for some open looks there. Sure, shots not falling for Wofford. I think what we're also not talking about in this moment, Josh, is that, again, Duke's the tallest team in America, and an open look is only an open look for a matter of seconds before you've got an outstanded arm in front of you trying to alter or deter your shot. And I think we saw that a whole lot in this game in particular on Saturday, where, yeah, there were a couple of defensive breakdowns and it turns into an open look, but the majority of the time, Duke still did a remarkable job in their closeout efforts to contest the shot. And all you got to do is just get into the head of those shooters one or two times, and they're going to be thinking about it every time they shoot the ball. Like, oh my goodness, got to get this off quick because I know long arms are coming my way.
Yeah, the length of the defense. I mean, there were a couple of rotations that we played in this Wofford game where Cooper was basically the three. And that's a very long three there, for Duke. And then yeah, I think it's underrated, the fact that Foster and Proctor are both 6'5",
Yeah.
and have, good reach, because you don't have that, you know, I all with all due respect, you don't have that, like, undersized, like, RJ Davis, type on this team, who can sometimes get picked on, on the defensive side, of the ball. And so, yeah, I mean, really the success of this team is going to be at how well they can clamp down on defense and lock teams up, as the season progresses. And then what you're hoping for if you're Coach Scheyer is that your offense and your defense are clicking, when it matters most, late February and into March and April, and see how far this team can go.
I think we forgot to mention that Duke also had the debut of Patrick Ngongba II.
That's
I
right.
mentioned it a little bit briefly in the program today, but I want to bring it up again when we're talking about size. Because, oh yeah, what a luxury for the Duke basketball team. Here's a 6'11", 250-pound freshman who's making his college debut. 2 points, 6 rebounds, 5 of them on the offensive end of the floor, but didn't look too lost defensively, which was great to see in Pat's 11 minutes. Conman Malawach only played 13 minutes. I mean, it was a lot of rotating in the front court, and to see what those guys did in their limited minutes, really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, in case you forgot, right? In case you forgot that Big Pat was on the team. And you're right, he did not look lost on the defensive end. He's very skilled, actually. Like, he's a good passer, it seems, and like you said, crash the boards. There were a couple of possessions, one possession in particular, where I think 2 different times he actually got the tap out on the offensive board. And so, I mean, what a luxury, right? What a luxury to have Malik Brown, Big Pat, and Man. Like that's pretty incredible for Jon Scheyer and for this coaching staff to have. But once again, that means that with that lineup, that's 11, JJ. That's 11 deep that you can run and not see much drop off. And I think we've talked about this in the offseason. That's actually the biggest question mark about this team is, how is Coach Scheyer going to handle this rotation? We've talked about Isaiah Evans. We've, in passing, mentioned Darren Harris. Now we've got Big Pat thrown in the mix. And it's like, how are these guys on any other Duke team? They would be in that top 8 rotation. There's no question. But on this team, with the talent top to bottom, how is Coach Scheyer going to maneuver this? It's going to be something that I think, we're all going to be keeping our eyes on here over the first, month of the season.
Offensively, Tyrese Proctor led the way for Duke with 15 points. He made 4 3-point shots, on 7 attempts. And then Duke wins this game with their 2 leading scorers, Cooper Flagg and Con Knippel, scoring just 8 points each, and got amazing offensive contributions from other people like Conman Malawach, who scores 11 points in 13 minutes. Super efficient on the offensive end. And how about Isaiah Evans, scoring 14 points in just 12 minutes out there on the floor? Really, really impressive.
Well, with Isaiah Evans, I'm not going to use the word criticism, but one of the just the reports about his high school game was that he was an incredible shooter and he was a scorer and he can score in bunches, but sometimes his shot selection was questionable. Well, when you're on a team with this much talent, as what Isaiah Evans is able to play with on this Duke team, you don't have to really worry about taking bad shots, right? It's like, when you get the shots, knock them down.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be really key for Isaiah, is to stay in the flow of the offense, to take the good shots. There's no reason to force anything that's not there in this offense, because you've got 4 other guys on the court at all times that can get their shots. So, I think Isaiah could really flourish in the system and become like a very efficient scorer. Not to go back to this, but it will all just matter of, can this coaching staff trust him to lock up on the defensive side of the floor, because that's going to keep him on the court.
We will certainly see a 51-point victory for Duke over Wofford. That is the fewest points given up by a Duke team in the shot clock era. That goes all the way back to the late 60s. So really, really impressive what Duke did on Saturday against the Terriers. Now it's Arizona, a tough test out west, 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Friday night. Another late one going into your weekend, and then a late Saturday football game in Durham that we'll get to in just a little bit. really excited about this Arizona game. It's no longer a top 10 matchup. It's two top 20 teams. But I think that, Proctor and Foster certainly remember what it was like to have those guys come into Cameron Indoor last year and pick up a win. And I like what we saw from Duke on Saturday, the way they responded. I think it's going to be a really serious week of practice that they go through, and they'll step up and be ready for this big test.
Well, of course, and Tyrese Proctor, goes all the way back to the Caleb Love, first season for Proctor was Love's last season, I believe, in Chapel Hill. And so you've got the whole Carolina, kind of rivalry coming into this. And, it's going to be great. Of course, both teams, Arizona coming directly off a loss, a blowout loss to Wisconsin, did not look good in that game at all. And then Duke, coming off the Kentucky loss, but having that buffer game in between to kind of right the ship. I love Duke's chances here. I think it's great. I love all the, Coach Scheyer's able to shut up the Coach K haters of like he never plays a true road game. Here's a true road game going to Arizona, playing at their place. It's going to be a hostile environment. I'm sure it's the most expensive ticket on Arizona's schedule for this season. That's just what Duke does, the Duke effect. But I think you've got to come in, if you're Duke early season, chip on your shoulder. We're going to shut the crowd up. We're going to make a statement. The Kentucky game was a fluke. That's not who we are. We're going to come out on the national stage and we're going to win a big road game early in the season. And, once again, I think you're going to see a bounce back game from, you mentioned Cooper. I mean, he did only have 9 points, but I think he had 8 rebounds, 6 assists or something like that. I mean, it was
all around game.
Correct. It was a Cooper Flag game, but Con, wasn't able to get going in that Wofford game. I think you're going to see those guys bounce back. And, I look for Duke to take this win. I don't know how many of you on the East Coast here are going to stay up for the entire game. But I'm hoping Duke, puts some space, 15, 20 point lead there. And maybe some of you old people can go to sleep Friday night.
Call it a night, yeah. And just hope you don't wake up with Saturday morning scaries to a loss that turned around in the second. Because, look, a lot of people might have gone to sleep with a 9-point lead at halftime against Kentucky and then woke up to some tough news. So hopefully that doesn't happen going into the weekend. All right, one more break. On the other side, this Duke football team only has one game left at home this season. One more time inside Wallace Wade Stadium. We'll break that down and more with Josh Cox when we return here in just a moment. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by one of our new friends, Mint Mobile. That's right. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. You got to make it easy. No hoops, no BS, straight to the point. Make it easy. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. How great is that? Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for just $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower than 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions will apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Mint Mobile is a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. Okay, one more time this weekend, we'll have Duke football playing inside Wallace Wade Stadium. Enjoyed getting the chance to hear from head football coach Manny Diaz previewing the Virginia Tech game coming up this weekend. And what you think about the last game of the year, you always think about the Senior Day festivities that are set to take place for a program. And nowadays you've got guys who are getting recognized, rightfully so, for Senior Day, but they've only spent maybe a year or two in Durham. But when you think about guys like Jordan Moore, Eli Pankel, Jalen Stinson, 3 names in particular that Manny Diaz pointed out, it is really awesome to think about the fact that they're part of 15 wins out of their last 18 home games inside Wallace Wade Stadium.
Yeah, interestingly enough, there's a lot of our rival fans that like to poke fun at Wallace Wade. Wallace Wade has turned into a home field advantage for sure, for Duke football. And you're right, man, to think about these guys who are going to be playing, for sure playing their last games inside of Wallace Wade Stadium in front of their home fans. Obviously Jordan Moore is kind of the one that sticks out the most. But yeah, you're right, Stinson and Pancol, and there's a long list of them. And then you have the other guys who, in the landscape of college athletics and the way it is nowadays, you have no idea who's going to be back on this roster. And so,
Right.
It's just a sentimental day for Duke football fans who have invested their time and energy and money, into this program, into this team, to get to see, those players play. And then, those that are walking for senior day, it's going to be a special time. Most of them have extended family and friends, more people here at this game than they would typically have. And, it's just going to be a really good vibe, I believe, in the stadium, this coming Saturday. And then I think some former players are going to be back for this game. We've Jamion Franklin has confirmed he's coming back, and we've heard chirpings about some other players who may be able to make this trip back. And so, all in all, just going to be a great atmosphere. And real quick, one last thing before you ask another question, JJ, that is, I do love the fact that senior day is not the weekend of Thanksgiving. Over the last few years, we've had that final home game.
Yeah.
Wake Forest is typically what it's been or whatever. And man, the stadium is so empty, and just like, man, this is their last game in front of their home fans, and like no one's there. Like, this is going to be a great way for senior day to happen. 8 p.m. Primetime game with a pretty full stadium for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great to see. Really excited to see how this game plays out between the two teams. Very surprised that Duke opens and is an underdog at home in this one. Right now, our friends at FanDuel have the Hokies favored by 3, which is just really interesting. When I see this game play out, what I'm looking at a whole lot is how Duke can run the football against a defensive front in Virginia Tech. And how often have we said that throughout the course of the season, Josh? But you look at the Hokies, they're next to last in the ACC in rushing yards per game. Duke, 15th out of 17 schools running the football offensively. Feels like something's got to give here, and maybe that'll be kind of a big-time factor in how this one plays out. There's the added fun element that this is an important matchup in the game, and it features the one guy who is not playing for Duke, who had the past previous years, who'd also be recognized in senior day festivities, and Aeneas Peebles, who's now transferred to Virginia Tech. That's kind of the one matchup that jumps out to me.
Yeah, for sure. And then on the other side of the ball, you have Virginia Tech, who is a great running team, and Tootin is a great running back. And so I think the run games will kind of be the story of this game. Can Duke slow them down? And then can Duke move them enough to get their running game going? And so that would be a welcome, addition to this offense. It seems like the last couple of weeks we've just not been able to see, Duke move the ball on the ground. Now, counterpoint there, you have seen Duke move the ball better through the air.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I do have a little bit of that. I don't care how we get there. Let's just score more points than the other team and get out of there with a win, So, but you're right, JJ. I think interesting to see this offensive line. Can they open up holes for Star Thomas and company in the backfield?
All right, Duke and Virginia Tech, 8 p.m. Eastern, inside Wallace Wade Stadium. Going to be a fun one. We'll have more conversations about this game as we get closer to it. Josh, always grateful for your time. Before you get out of here, though, I got to hear about the Section 17 podcast. Tell us what we're missing.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't listen, this week we just dropped earlier this week an episode previewing the Virginia Tech game. We actually brought on former Duke quarterback Thomas Sirk, and we talked about that 4 overtime game in Lane Stadium back in 2015 that Duke ended up winning.
Crazy to think that's been about a decade ago now. At this
it's crazy.
Point. Yeah.
It is nuts. But that was a great conversation. But we would love to have you wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search Section 17 podcast. We'd love YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. And then also, if you happen to be coming to the game, if you are local and you come to home games, we are tailgating in lot B3. There's a huge tailgate now. JJ, you've not been able to experience this yet, but I mean, we probably got 15 tents set up, all
That's awesome.
strung together, and we got some good food, and it's open to the public. So we'd love to have you come tailgate and hang out for sure.
That's awesome. All right, go check them out. Go check out Section 17 podcast. Josh, it's great to see you as always. We'll do it again soon, okay?
JJ, have a good one, man. Go Duke.
All right, that's Josh Cox joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Great conversation talking all things basketball ahead of this Arizona game this weekend, and then one more football game at home for the Blue Devils. Just 2 games left in the regular season. That'll do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.